What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Lost Records Journal Play One Vs. Lost Records Focus podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Adnan and Riaz. We did actually have a recording for this. Unfortunately, I deleted it because when we were recording our next episode of Strange Cast, we have one backlogged. It's coming soon. I actually deleted that session, and me and Adam had recorded the intro and outro for Side A and Side B for this podcast. So unfortunately, I don't have that, and I've had to impromptu record this. But yeah, basically, this is our interview with Sam Bradley that's coming. The plan is to release it Side A and then Side B, and then as a full-length interview for people to watch. It's just been a lot of moving parts, and we just haven't had time to get it out. We're really excited to drop this first part. And hopefully the second part comes very soon. I know Sam's been promoting stuff on his Instagram in terms of, his new project that he's done, which you should go and check out. It looks really exciting. So any support you can give him, that is great. But before we start as well, if you are new here, please do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn notifications, like the video, and share your friends. And Lost Records Journal is available on all podcast services. You can check us out on Spotify with the video version, Apple Podcast. We have almost 200 followers on Spotify. We have 42 ratings on Spotify. So, if you can help rate us and follow us, and you can boost our visibility if you follow us. That's the main thing. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode. Like I said, Side A is here. Side B, hopefully, I will try and turn over at a faster rate and it will come sooner. And then we'll release a full-length interview. We did record Strange Cast on the weekend. My plan is to try and get that out this week. So bear with me as well. Hopefully, I can get these things done. But without further ado, we had the absolute pleasure of speaking with Sam Bradley, Don't Nod Montreal's very, very talented art director. So I hope you enjoy this first part of our two-part special podcast episode. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Lost Records Journal podcast, Play One vs. Lost Records Focus podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Adnan Riaz. My co-host, Adam Evalt, is here. Adam, you here?
I am here. I am inked up, and I'm ready to go.
You're inked up, you're ready to go, because obviously we just had Michel and Luke on for a podcast. We just had Ruth Radley on for a podcast, and that was just myself, but Adam's back now because we have the wonderful Sam Bradley, who's Don't Nod Montreal's art director. Sam, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yes.
We're really happy to have you on here. We're really excited because obviously we love the artwork. We love everything you did on this project, and it's so excited to kind of talk to you about this. And obviously we also found out that you listened to the podcast, and it made our life a lot easier because we're like, we don't have to do all the explanation stuff, which is quite nice. But no, we're really excited to have you on here because I think, what you guys did behind the scenes on the art stuff is just really, really remarkable. And there's just so many little things I want to pick your mind about because I've just been catching up on things. But before we start as well, if you are new here, please do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn on notifications, like the video, share your friends. And Lost Records Journal is available on all podcast services, so go and check us out there. We're on Spotify with the video version. I'm really condensing that as well because I hate doing it. It kills my cell every time because it's a YouTube part. But Sam, I'm going to start with you and just kind of show you some things. I'm not going to go into the who is Sam Bradley cliche question. I'm just going to ask you something else. So
Sure.
bear with me as I read this. So this quote, and it says, I can talk about this topic endlessly. And first of all, thank you for saying that. It's one of those things when I trust when other people say that, but from my point of view, genuinely, I can't see it. And the reason is that when I was younger, it was something I was super, super hung up on. And I think it wasn't until I let go of the pressure, like finding my style. It wasn't until that point people started saying this to me. So that is you on the Creative Theory podcast in April 2022. This is just months before you joined Don't Nod Montreal. And you are talking about your distinct art style, or someone or the host says to you that they noticed your distinct pattern and you were like, I'm not too sure, I didn't see that. And then you talk about JC, is it JC Linedecker as well, and time in art school. So I'm just curious as well, 3 years on from that, you're now the art director at Don't Nod Montreal. Do you see your distinct art style now, or are you still in the same place?
I for sure do not see it the way other people do, but I can acknowledge, that the people around me who do see it are responding to it genuinely, right? I feel like for me, it's interesting. Yeah, you did some deep dive to find that quote, by the way. That's great. And, something that I think that has continued to progress since that interview is that for me, there was a period when I was younger where I was like, I guess pretty hung up on trying to figure out what my art style would be. And the more I thought about it, the more I got into my head about it. And I think it kind of stunted my artistic growth a little bit because it was something that seemed like a really big deal to my then young artist self who was trying to like figure out who I was. And now, I just really don't engage with that idea a whole lot anymore. And I think because I don't, the style has sort of developed on its own. So I think my struggle to see it isn't for a lack of it being there. It's just that I'm not spending the effort to try to see it. I'm just kind of letting it happen, and it's cool that it is happening, but I feel like I'm personally anyways better off as an artist not worrying about it too much and sort of just letting it bubble up to the surface, letting it evolve on its own. That voice is there and other people recognize it. And I feel like if I were to really, put it under a microscope again and be like, okay, what is my style? I might start to get in my head about it again. So yeah, it is there. But I feel like for me, it is much less of a thing that I concern myself with than it was 15 years ago in art school when it was like a big deal to me.
Yeah,
And just to bleed into that as well, because I'll take a Patreon question here. This is from Kevin Lackner, and
of
KJL said,
course.
"Where do you find your inspiration?"
Oh my gosh, this is a really big question. I feel like, and we can maybe break it out a little bit if you guys want to, because
Mm,
I feel like it comes from different places for different contexts, right? Like to speak to my own inspirations versus the kind of inspirations that inspire the work that I'm doing for my career. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty wide range. For me as a person though, I feel like taking inspiration from real life is so important for me. Trying to find sort of like the purest form of anything, I feel like is the best place for inspiration. And what I mean by that is that I feel like if I spend too much time only being inspired by other artists, there's this chance that things start to feel like a photocopy, like just a slightly less good version of a thing that already exists, or
mm,
something that maybe the idea behind what has inspired me isn't 100% understood, but then retranslated. So a little bit of the essence gets lost. And I feel like for me, the best way to avoid that sort of photocopy effect is, the real world, like getting out there, interacting with people, seeing places, having experiences, and doing my best to try and capture the memory of that in my head, the way that those things make me feel, so that eventually when it's time to channel that into artwork, it's fresh and to some degree original anyways. Not to say that I'm
mm.
not inspired by other artists though. I mean, I can go on and on. You can see behind me there's a ton of art books back there. I have a massive art book collection, and so the easiest answer actually is, if I have no inspiration, I spin my chair 180 degrees and I've got a bit of a library back there, with an endless font of inspiration. Yeah, and then when it comes to work stuff, and maybe we can talk about specifics later, but yeah, it really depends on the type of project, the collaboration, the subject matter, how I'm interacting with other artists. There's such a wide range of different fonts of inspiration for creative collaborations. So yeah, it's one of the reasons actually I like working in this sort of industry where everyone is working together is I'm often also surprised by things that end up being inspirations. I get introduced to things by people that I'm working with that I never would have discovered on my own, and end up becoming, pretty large inspirations for the work.
Can
Nice.
I piggyback off of that?
Please.
I have a serious vendetta against the phrase that's been going around like TikTok, Instagram, and I feel like it's only just like this algorithmic world that's people only say this. Create more than you consume. I have a vendetta against that because it kind of points into this direction that don't consume other people's work, don't consume art around you, don't consume, just create. And I feel like that's going into a direction of a capitalistic roundabout, just like make content for the
Yeah.
algorithm. Don't consume it, just make it. I consume so much, like so much music just to get me inspired. You said you have art books behind you just to inspire.
Yeah.
What is your take on the whole catchphrase, create more than you consume?
Just
Yeah. It's a weird
before
one,
you
right?
answer
Oh,
that as well, I think
sure.
as well, just to add on to that as well, you don't put advertisement like pieces on your website, do you? Because like like commission driven ones. I was listening to the podcast. You saying that you don't like it's all pure art form. You don't make like specific commercialized pieces and you don't put them on your website. Just to kind of add into that, is that right?
Until very recently. So until the last 6 months or so, I went onto my website and I started putting client work on there for the first
Mm,
time ever. And
Mm.
the reason for this, I was pretty conflicted about it, and it does sort of relate to both of those questions. For the longest time, you could see the work that I was doing for studios on my social media, my Instagram, when I was on Twitter, on there. But I've started to like walk back the time and energy that I spend engaging with social media. Obviously, I'm still on there. It's how I, first connected with you guys. I'm still scrolling Instagram maybe a little bit more than I should, but I at one point, I don't know, probably 2 years ago, hit the eject button from Twitter, and a few years before that from Facebook. And both of the times that I did this, I felt like it was a really positive boost in terms of my mental health. It was like the social media was having an influence on me that wasn't great. But because of that, and especially when I stopped using Twitter, there ended up just being no place to see a lot of the work that I had done for clients. And the reason I had this separation between personal work and professional work, and it was a pretty hard line on my website where it was only personal work, is that I feel like a lot of the best creative collaborations I've had have actually come from people getting excited about the things that I do, as opposed to the things that I have done for other people. And I don't even remember who, but somebody told me very early on in my career that if there's something you want to do and something you want to be hired for, and there's work you want to do, make sure that that is the work that you're showing to people. Because if you're showing other things, guaranteed, if you're unhappy with something but you're showing it because you got paid to do it, someone else is going to hire you to do that thing you don't want to do, right? So my mentality was have this website full of my own art that eventually, in theory, someone is going to stumble across this. They're going to like what I do. They're going to like my voice, my style, to come back to that previous question, and they're going to want to collaborate with me for that, as opposed to having me emulate something I had done that someone else, had directed me to do on a previous project. But as soon as I got rid of my Twitter, I just realized that there was people out there reaching out. They wanted to see that art that I had made, and there was nowhere to see it online. So my current thinking is that there is now like a personal art section and a professional art section on my website, and it's good enough. I think I'm not as like hardcore about it as I was when I was younger as well. I think my opinions were a little more black and white, and I have, as I've gotten older, realized there's room for nuance in there. I can have a website that is a gallery of my own work that people can get excited about, but then they can scroll and click on professional work and see, some of the client work that I've done on there as well. And sorry, part two, to answer this question, you were asking about, create more than you can consume, or create more than you do consume. I feel like it is sort of this like rise and grind sort of mindset that overlaps with this, right? And it is sort of the world of content that we live in now. Yes, like feed the beast, because it is endlessly hungry and there always needs to be more. And I think it's different for everyone, honestly. I can see why for some people maybe that works for them. But for me, I feel like there's so many valid reasons to consume what other people are doing. One, first of all, I'm just a fan. There's like tons of artists and creative people out there in the world that I love, people who are making movies, making music, making games, writing books. And I just like enjoy those things. It's a nice way for me to disconnect and recharge after a long day. I'm not even necessarily always going there to be inspired. I'm not trying to like eat that up so that I can regurgitate it later. It's just it's a pleasurable thing for me to like curl up with a book for half an hour before bed, and maybe those ideas eventually find their way into my work in the future, but maybe they don't, and that's fine. And for me, I feel like I need to try and be mindful about maintaining a balance, though, because I do get like, when it comes to my work, pretty intense. I go pretty hard at times, and it's also a good opportunity to, step back and treat myself to, watching a season of TV or something like that. If, there's been an especially intense period of time, either in my personal art or, time at work when things are getting wild, it's nice to have a little bit of an opportunity to hit reset and just enjoy what other people are making. Hopefully does that answer your question? Is that sort of
it's like it's the balance, rather than just like you said, when you're younger you just have such a black and white mentality. There's nuance to consume, and I think people only say that because there's so much content to consume now than ever before. So now they have to put up this guardrail of saying create more than you consume. But at the same time, a lot of my music was inspired by just listening and watching shows and seeing art and just consuming that, getting stained by it, and like, oh, I got this idea because I consumed. So I don't know. It's the whole internet is so black and white nowadays.
It really is.
There's nothing wrong with being black and white. I'm just going to say that. Maybe that's just where I'm at in my life. But but Sam, no, it's fascinating to hear your perspective. And obviously, I'd love to keep. I think we could do a 3-hour expose just on your like your perspective on art, because I think it's fantastic. But I kind of want to bleed it into somewhere, because obviously we had the gaffers on, Michel and Luke, recently. You went and worked with Don't Nod Montreal in 2022. Tell us about that process. How did you get involved there, and how did you get involved in the studio and then become the art director as well?
Sure. Yeah. It was really like a strange, unexpected confluence of events that brought me to Don't Nod. If you could go back in time 10 years ago and tell me that this would be the job that I would be doing around the time that I discovered Life is Strange 1, I would never in a million years believe you, right? Because when I first discovered Don't Nod, through Life is Strange, I was a big fan right away, maybe similar to you guys. Like I really connected with the first game, and then probably even more so the second game. They just found me at the right time and place in my life. But for me at the time, an artist working then in film, living in Canada, seeing video games being created by a studio in Paris, it's a different industry, a different continent, and a different language. It wasn't even a thing like, oh, maybe one day I can work there, because there was no path. There were so many walls. It would be like for me to say, if you were to tell me a year from now I was going to be working at Studio Ghibli, it's just like there was no road to how something like that could align, right? But then a few things happened. First of all, COVID happened, which meant that a lot of artists all of a sudden began to be able to work remotely, which was a really new thing for the creative industry. For a long time, it was like you're at a desk in a studio working elbow to elbow with your fellow creatives. And, the world has changed dramatically in that regard, obviously, in the last 5 or 6 years. And then Don't Nod Montreal happened. The core team, Life is Strange folks, from Paris to Montreal to start a new studio, which again is something that, like, as an outsider, I didn't know anyone who was working there, sort of followed along from a distance, like other fans of the studio did, but I had no idea that they were looking to relocate. And then in my own life, I had been approached to work in the video games industry sort of unexpectedly. I had been working on a film, and my composer, he had scored some video game soundtracks, and that's actually how I discovered his work. Like, I was a big fan of some of the video game music he had done. So I was working on a film, and I reached out and said, hey, I love your music. Can we collaborate on some animation together? And he was stoked. So we worked together for a while, and it just so happened that there was a video game he was working on at the same time. And he had my film up on his screen when the creative director of this video game called Jet walked into his studio to say, hey, we gotta make some music together, and saw a little bit of my film, and he was like, oh, what is this? Who is this guy? And so I got put in touch through my pal Jim, the composer, with the team at Super Brothers. And so from that, it was like an unexpected backdoor entry into the video games industry for me, which was at the time super exciting, because I've always been a gamer my whole life, but had never really considered it. At the time I was very much like, I'm working in film. But yeah, I was a huge fan, and they reached out. And so I went and ended up art directing and doing concept art for this game called Jet the Far Shore. And so the very long answer short to your question is, as I was wrapping up art directing on that, I saw a post on Instagram. Actually, we're back here again. This is why I got to get my Instagram from Lucille, who was the pre-production art director at Don't Nod at the time for the project that was about to go on. And she was saying that she needed some help with concept art. And so then I was like, oh, well, this is interesting. This is a post in English. What is this project even? I would assume this would just be for people in Paris, So there was a little bit more information, and I slid into her DMs, and I was like, hey, look, I'm wrapping up art directing this other game. Big fan of Don't Nod. You can actually still see it if you scroll far enough on my back in my Instagram. You'll see some fan art I made of Max in like 2017 or something like that. So I had a little bit of like legit cred where I could tell her, hey, look, I'm a real fan. You can see some of my Life is Strange fan art on there. Yeah. And she got back to me. And so I started out freelancing as a concept artist. And I feel like I was doing that even before, so like the 2022 is when I started art directing. And I feel like I started as a concept artist in probably mid 2021 ish, I would guess. I don't know the exact date, but probably like 6 or 8 months before that. Yeah. And then at a point, Lucille ended up leaving the project. And it was funny, actually. I had been doing some freelance concepts, and it was going well, but it was like very piecemeal because it was super early in the project. So it was kind of like, we're figuring out the story. We're not really sure of a lot of things, but we do know these little bits of what would eventually become Bloom and Rage. And so, hey, Sam, can you, paint something like this and like this and like this? And I worked on a few things for a few months, and then there was like radio silence. And so I was like, oh, maybe, life as a freelancer, this often happens where, you're working with someone, you're collaborating, you get pretty far, some cool stuff happens, and then, for whatever reason, things end. And yeah, so I was kind of like grinding away for a few months, and then sent some work in, and they're like, oh, we'll get back to you a few weeks, and I wasn't hearing anything back. And I was like, okay, well, it was cool. I got to work with Don't Nod, like bucket list collaboration checked off the list. And then, like 2 months later, where it was almost to the point where I was like starting to forget about the project, I got an email from Luke, and he's like, hey, can we hop on a call. And so I got on a call with him and Michel, and they were like, hey, look, sorry, we haven't been in touch recently, but we've been, organizing the team. And it turns out we're going to need an art director for production. And we loved working with you as a concept artist. Do you want to shift into that role? So I was very caught off guard because I thought, we had sort of like fulfilled the creative collaboration that we had set out to do. And then all of a sudden I was on a call getting the offer to art direct the project. And so I was thrilled at that point. Because like I said, there was no way for me to imagine ending up at this studio whose work I really admired and playing an integral role in one of their future projects. But yeah, the world just happened to spin in my favor in this one. So part luck, part timing, part hopefully, I assume good work. They were happy with what I was doing, and they wouldn't have offered me the position if they weren't. So yeah, it was like I said, strange but fortuitous confluence of events. It sure is. Yes, absolutely.
See, here I was thinking that you went to Lucille like, look at my dog. Look at the name there. This is what's going to get me the job. That's what I was thinking you were going to do.
Yeah. So I know that Luke spoiled this story, but it is true. My dog is named Mushroom for fans of Life is Strange 2, R.I.P. Mushroom. Yeah, and I was actually like quite embarrassed about this when I first connected with the team. I had rescued my pup from Mexico probably like 6 or 8 months before I had spoken to Lucille or anyone else on the team. And yeah, my partner and I had just finished playing Life is Strange 2 together, and we needed a name. And her name when we fostered her was pretty similar. So we were like, oh, we still miss and love Mushroom from Life is Strange. Why don't we just do that? And my dog definitely is very much a mushroom. It is the perfect name for her. Yeah. And then so when I connected, for months, my dog would wander in behind me on the call, and I'd be like, isn't my pup so cute? But I wouldn't say her name. And it was like months in where I was like, guys, I have a confession. And it was like so awkward, but they all thought it was great. I remember Luke telling Jean-Luc about it and Michel talking about it as well. And part of the reason why I eventually caved is I wanted to know why they named their dog Mushroom, so I could understand why my dog was named Mushroom. Yeah. So eventually it all came out, and everyone thought it was funny that I had hid it from the team for so long.
Nice.
I have 2 follow-up questions to your story. My first question, you said your composer's friend was named Jim. You're not talking about Jim Guthrie, right?
Jim Guthrie. Yeah,
No
he's a good pal of
way,
mine.
dude.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I connected with him because the music he made for Sword and Sorcery. I don't know if you guys have played this game or familiar with it, but all-timer soundtrack for me. Love that soundtrack. And yeah, I was making an animated film. Yeah, but yeah, his work on Below is so good. Oh my god,
so good, dude. Yeah.
All of his work with Cappy all of his work in general, but his Cappy work especially, I love. Yeah, and Sorcery was just a soundtrack that I went back to a lot and continue to still listen to. And so when I was making my film, his music was just in my head. Maybe, just to rewind for a second, the inspiration topic. For me, I feel like a thing that I do regularly is I try to find inspiration in sort of adjacent but different areas. So when I was working on this film that I was making, I made a soundtrack that really captured the feel and the mood of the kind of art that I wanted to be drawing. And I would just loop that soundtrack for hours while I was drawing. So I wasn't referencing anything visually, but there was a tone in my head. And a few of Jim's songs were on that soundtrack. And they're burned into my brain at this point from hearing them over and over while I was storyboarding this film. Yeah. And so I just shot him an email. And I was like, hey, I'm making this thing. Can I show you some art and pitch you an idea? And conveniently, he's here in Toronto with me. We live in the same city. So we met up for coffee. And I showed him. Yeah. So, and then, we become pals. So he was the one who introduced me to the Super Brothers team. And yeah, the last time I saw him was just a couple of months ago. We don't get together as much as I would like, but we still keep in touch and hang out every now and then.
I'm completely jealous of your work. Not only you're high-fiving Luke Bagados, but you're hanging out with Jim Guthrie and scientific. It's just like, dang, I got to move to Canada. This is just unfair. But
I've been very lucky to collaborate with some cool folks, that's for sure.
The other question I have, and this like really resonates with me as well. I tell people all the time that like art school is just one direction. It's just one of many directions. And we get to hear from other people in the video game industry that have different stories of how they more or less stumbled into the industry. I always say that like you can go to art school or you can just connect with people. What do you say to people that say like, what is the path I need to take to achieve my goals of getting into said industry, film, music, whatever it is?
I don't think there is one specific road. And I feel like, as I've continued to grow in my career and, the last few years, especially some of the projects that I've worked on have been the kinds of projects that I think up and coming artists would be really enthusiastic to take part in? I get asked this question a lot, and I think it's tricky because sadly, well, maybe not sadly, it's kind of like it's kind of exciting, but there isn't really a step A, B, C to getting
Mm.
to these places, right? I think a
Mm.
big part of how to find success that is aligned with who you are as a creative is to really find a way to do the things you love and show them to people. And I think do the things you love, part of that really depends from person to person. You know, you mentioned art school versus being self-taught, and I've met people who have followed both of those roads and really, succeeded and found the path that they were looking for by taking both of those starting points, right? I feel like people who go to art school have the benefit of building connections and having a community. I went to art school, and I graduated 2007, so almost 20 years since I've been out of art school, and I
Dang.
still keep in touch with some of my besties from college. More than once I can think of times where they have helped me find work, I have helped them find work. Speaking about inspiration, having a group of peers to come up alongside of, really great. It helps motivate you when you see other people who are really stepping their game up. You feel like you need to step your game up. In that sense, it's awesome. But I have other friends, no art school at all, and there are a lot of benefits to that as well. Like art school is, especially now, 20 years ago it was expensive. Now it's insanely expensive. Like the tuition for school,
Yeah.
it's unreal. And with the internet now, there's so many opportunities to connect with professionals who are more than willing to teach you outside of a formal school
Yeah.
environment, right? So many really talented artists. Maybe you would know better than me. I don't know if it's the same for music, but for art, there are so many people who are, at the top of their field, and they have like a Gumroad or a Patreon, and you can go on there and learn the fundamentals of how they became who they are. And this was a thing that was never something I would have even imagined would be possible when I was in art school, right? So there are so many
Yeah.
ways to access this, far fewer barriers to, like, yeah, get really, really close to the people who are doing the best work out there. And these are the kinds of people you want to be learning from, right? So,
Mm.
and especially people are really self-motivated. I feel like school for me was really good because when I started studying, I didn't have a lot of self-discipline. It was hard for me to build a routine and get my work done. And just being in an environment that had some structure taught me how to do that. It was one of the most important skills that I learned really in school, was just how to self-direct and be self-motivated. But I
Mm.
didn't have that when I started. If I were to meet a young artist though who is
Mm.
super motivated and driven on their own, that to me would be a good sign to encourage them to potentially explore options other than school. Because if you can, like, really set your mind to something and work hard and focus and keep yourself on track, there's no reason why you can't achieve the same things that most people are coming out of art school doing without having to go through, the process of formal schooling or spending all that money. So yeah, I don't think there's a right way. And then
Yeah.
the follow-up question you had there about, like, ending up in a position like this, it's the same kind of thing. Like for me, like, it was this weird winding path that took me in an unexpected route. If you were to ask me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, what I thought I would have been doing now,
Mm.
it wouldn't have been this, but this is amazing. Like, I feel like being willing to see a door open and not be shy to potentially deviate your path a little bit when a good opportunity
Yes.
arises, and doing your best to also, a lot of people say right place, right time, and I think that is true. But the reality is that you can put yourself in the right place a whole bunch of times, and eventually it will be the right time, right?
Mm.
The half of that equation is in the control of the person trying to navigate and chart their course, right? And so it's not always
Yes.
the right time, but you can keep putting yourself in the right place, and then eventually, the stars will align. If you put yourself in the right
Mm.
place enough time, it will be the right time for you. But yeah, it's often
Yeah.
when you least expect it.
I think about that all the time. Like I moved from Fargo to Raleigh, and like what 7 months ago, and now I'm about to go into a indie game showcase where I'll be representing 3 games I provided music for.
So cool.
That's what I mean. It's just like going to the right place, that being Raleigh, where all the game developers are. And I always say that like life is a gamble, so put yourself in a lucky spot. You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
like, honestly, Fargo was not the lucky spot at all.
Okay.
Lucky for cold, but that's about it.
So I was disappointed that you didn't say name your cat Pippin and then getting Michel's DMs to get into art school or some kind of job opportunity. I'm just going to put that out there. But no, it's very interesting
Yeah.
perspective to see how you've map that out, because I think art is so difficult now, and how to get into some certain fields. Like music was so open many years ago, and same with art as well. And now it's just quite, some of the routes are narrow, but it's fascinating to hear your perspective. And I've taken a big chunk of Lost Records topic to talk about, but before we start with that, I'm going to take another Patreon question, and this is from
Sure.
Kevin Kestis, and they said, "What was your favorite location or scene to bring to life in Lost Records?"
Ooh.
Oh, my favorite. Oh boy. I feel like I want to pick a favorite, but I maybe will talk through a couple just because I had a hand in a few of them, and I don't know who's my favorite child. It's a tricky one.
Was it
I
the
feel like,
cabin dance scene?
pardon me.
Was it the cabin dance scene?
Everyone loves the cabin dance scene. How can you go wrong with that cabin dance scene? Admittedly, though, I will say a lot of the look of that dance scene, obviously due to Michel. He was quite had a big hand in how that was going to come together. To no one's
It was very
surprise, right?
Michel Koch, yes.
Yeah, very much so. I feel like the blue spruce was a big one for me because that was the first assignment that I got when I joined the project as just a concept artist, right? So yeah, my first few months working on the project, when I met with Lucille, she basically said, "Would you be more interested in working on garage or a small town bar?" And I told her that I grew up in a small town and my mom was a waitress at my uncle's small town bar. So I probably would be able to nail the vibe if she sent me in that direction. And so she was like, "Perfect. You know the content. Let's see what you can do." And so, yeah, I kind of dove in headfirst to the blue spruce. So that one I feel like is, pretty near and dear to me. Also because it went through a lot of evolution, because it was really maybe it was the first environment that we really dug into in terms of art. Yeah. And then, it plays such an important role throughout the whole game. We constantly come back to it. I feel like Swann's bedroom was another big one. Some of the environments that we designed in the game took a lot of iteration and exploration, and from initial idea to what ended up in the finished product changed dramatically. But for whatever reason, Swann's bedroom, we just seemed to hone in on in a surprisingly easy way. I made a couple of thumbnails and a painting, and everyone was stoked about them. And the environment team took my rough concepts and really, really plus the space. And again, it's another environment where we come back to a whole bunch of times. So I had the pleasure of working with our lighting team to set up the moods of each of those return visits, which is, a big part of the space. And the collaboration that I have with the lighting team is great. So that, I'm very fond of that one. And then the third one that I think really stands out to me is Kat's bedroom, just because the scenes that take place in there are so emotional, right? I mean, I feel like what I did for that space, sets a stage, but really what everyone else did for, the moment with Kat and Swann. And I will, like you said, avoid getting too into spoilers, but in tape 2, there is
Oh, you can go into spoilers, sorry. You're fine to go into spoilers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, then for people who've played the game, I'm sure most people will remember there's a very emotional scene that happens with Kat and Swann in Kat's bedroom. And yeah, so for me, that one is special because I was excited about the concept art that I had made and the space that we had planned out, but then to see all of the work from the designers and writers and the music in that scene, everything all come together, and Michel kind of playing conductor in there to have all of the bits connect together. And it is such a beautiful scene. I feel like it's one of the most emotional ones for me when I play the game, so it was cool to have a hand in bringing that bit of the story to life.
Nice.
I don't know. So all that to say, if you made me choose, I guess I would choose Blue Spruce. But either we can even get more into it because all the locations, really, it's the part of the project that maybe I was most closely involved with. I worked super closely with the environment team, and a lot of the art. When you scroll through all the stuff that I have shared on social media, so much of it is environment related, right? So I have stories about I would assume every environment in the game. So
and funnily enough, that was the big topic part that I was going to bring in, because I was going to take you to the Mikaelsen ranch, and I was going to specifically focus on the masks, because you started posting concept art for them and they were quite detailed, and obviously people love them. And I kind of want to just focus on each of the character ones to start with. So I think the first one was like Nora's, is obviously because a lot of people thought it was a raccoon mask, but it turned out to be a badger mask. Intentionally badger. And then what do you think about the reaction when people thought it was a raccoon as well?
I feel like they're equally sassy animals, so I have no problem with the raccoon / badger confusion. Yeah, and in terms of Nora's mask, this one was a really fun one to design. I guess the idea in the lore, in the fiction, is that while they're all wearing different masks, Nora is the one who is sort of like the artist of the group, right? So she is the one who is making the masks, or at least helping everyone make the masks. There's a scene in the garage where there's a little bit of environmental storytelling where you can see the supplies that they had gathered together to make the masks sitting on a workbench in Nora's garage, right? So there is like an in fiction sort of explanation that she is the one crafting these, and so to make hers was pretty fun because it was cool to imagine her making it for herself and just being indulgent and being Nora and making it the way that she would like to make it. And I feel like it was cool the way that we had designed the mask, but then also painted her face to sort of align with the details on the mask. And the big punk rock pink mohawk was a cool touch. We didn't give any of our characters any crazy hair, so this was our opportunity to turn the hair dial up to 11 for a minute there with her mask. Yeah.
And
Dang.
interesting enough as well, Kat, I've always wanted to ask you this as well, because obviously Michel did interview rounds. He went and spoke to Bonus Action, and the cat mask stood out for a lot of reasons. Obviously, Raven's symbolism and stuff, but very eerily similar to Chloe Price's mask in Deck Nine's Life
Right.
is Strange Before the Storm. I got to ask you, was that some inspiration part of it? Was Chloe Price part of the inspiration, because we see nods within the game? Raven is quite associated with her because of Before the Storm, but did you think about Before the Storm and say, hey, this mask looks cool, or is it just pure coincidence that happened?
Yeah, it is coincidence, but we did notice it internally before the game released. I don't remember who it was, but someone on the team did at some point say, "Hey, did you realize?" And I have played Before the Storm, and I quite liked it actually. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. It is very similar." And I think that if I had realized that while I was designing Cat's mask, I maybe would have hesitated. And so I'm glad that I didn't, because similar or not, I'm really happy and proud with how Cat's mask turned out. Actually, it maybe I shouldn't play favorites, but if it maybe is my favorite of the masks. It's just
Yeah.
it turned out really good. It fits the mood of the scenes it's in really well. We had the trailer for tape 2 that came out with the burning deer, and you see Cat in her mask, and it's just so dramatic. Like, it just turned out really, really good. The character team did such a good job of taking the concept and like making it look amazing when they turned it into the 3D asset and had Cat wearing it. So yeah, I'm glad that the work on my side was done by the time I realized the similarities, because like I said, I might have been a bit iffy about riffing so directly on what they had done. But that said, I don't mind that there's a similarity there. Like I said, I played that game and I liked that game, and I feel like, even though Kat and Chloe, obviously very, very different characters, I can see why fans might look at one and the other and want there to be some overlap there. Even aside from the topic of the masks, actually, it's been really interesting to see, the hardcore Life is Strange fans look at Lost Records and what we're doing and draw comparisons, because sometimes, those are intentional, and other times it's just fans seeing a connection that they would like to be there. And I'm even hesitant to like confirm or deny which specific ones I'm thinking about right now, but there are ones that fall into both categories. And
Yes.
what I like about art in general is that, like, when you put something out into the world, it becomes its own thing. Like, while we're working internally on a project, we have specific intents and ideas and things we're trying to communicate and things we're trying to be clear about and other things we're trying to be maybe a little bit opaque about. But there's no way to really know for sure how people are going to receive a thing and feel about a thing. And then when it goes out into the world, it really does become its own entity. And so people are going to see things that are intentional and people are going to see things that are unintentional. And I don't think either of those things are right or wrong. It's just like how fans are consuming it. You think of like the way your favorite song makes you feel and the emotions you associate with it. I like that happens with our game. People see it and they're like, oh, clearly it means this. And as the person who made it, I was like, that is not at all what it means, but it's so cool that is what it means to you, and to me that is equally as valid whether or not I had planned it. So yeah, for the mask specifically, was not an intentional nod to that, but I'm actually like pretty glad
Yes.
about how it all turned out, and it is cool to see a little bit of parallel there.
Yeah, and for
Yes.
sure as well. Do you know the beak where it says "See you in hell"? Was that your touch?
So yeah, not only that, we didn't do this a lot, but we did for some of the key textures. I wrote it for real, like on paper, and then scanned it in. So the "See you in hell" on the beak, I pitched the idea and then I tried to do it digitally and it just wasn't working. So I got out a big old faded magic marker and a piece of cardboard. And so I wish I had If I'd known, I could have prepped it to show you guys, but I've written "See You in Hell" like 15 times. It looks like the kind of note you would find in a serial killer's basement. But I scanned it all in and then cut it all up so all the letters fit properly onto the beak. But yeah, there is like a random piece of cardboard with those words scribbled all over that I've kept as like a little keepsake for Kat's mask.
That is very cool. But no, it's interesting to hear
Yeah.
your perspective where you said even like interpretation with like art, because like, there's that old debate about like the scream. Is that person hearing a scream or is it person
Mm,
screaming? And same with like
yeah.
Mona Lisa. Why is the Mona Lisa smiling? Is she hiding one of Da Vinci's secrets or something? Like, interpretation is
Yeah.
always interesting. And I really want to dig in with this one because I think that the autumn wolf mask is probably the most complicated, because I just kind of went into a bit more of a rabbit hole recently before I was gonna ask you, because like, wolves aren't necessarily aggressive and like, attack worthy creatures, but this mask is like, it's got half of it, you got the art underneath a neck to kind of like match the
Yeah.
mask. And then, it's got blood on it, for example. So it's kind of like a little bit of an aggressive mask. But then obviously when you speak to Michelle's like, she's almost like the matriarch of that group, that she's like the wolf pack leader, to,
Yeah.
kind of protect everyone. I'm just kind of curious your perspective on when you were making that mask, because was it with Corey in mind, for example? Because Corey is also wearing the mask. So obviously the blood and thing would be reflective of him. And then even more so because you're a Life is Strange 2 fan, I only recently found this as well, like in terms of connecting dots. Sean Diaz is the Wolf brothers, Sean and Daniel
Yeah.
Diaz. Is there even that part of the inspiration you thought, actually, I like wolves for this reason, to kind of come into this mask?
Yeah, I mean the idea for it being a wolf specifically, this was from Michel. And so for me, this one was kind of like maybe the easiest and the hardest one to make in terms of art. The hardest one, I think, because for all of the other ones, there wasn't this dual purpose that was required, right? Like there were
Yeah.
just constraints that we had from the start, knowing where that mask would start and where it would end, right? With Autumn first
Yeah.
and then with Corey. So it was challenging to make sure that it would serve two very different purposes equally well, but easy in the sense that, yeah, Michel was like, it's for sure going to be a wolf mask. And because of those constraints, it was very easy for me to tell if it was working or not. So it was hard to
Yeah.
like get it in the pocket. But then once it was, there wasn't a lot of like, is this right? Is it not? 10% more or less badger, raccoon. We could do that with all of the other ones. It's like, let's, noodle it here and there just to get it feeling just right. And with hers, it was like, okay, it's working for this scene with Autumn. And then we know where it's going to go with Corey, and we're seeing him do what he needs to do with it. And it's working. It's like, okay, at this point, it was very easy to do a temperature check and know that we had succeeded once we finally got to that point. So yeah, that one was very different than the rest because it did have this dual purpose. And yeah, like you're saying, Autumn is sort of like the pack leader of the group, so the wolf made a lot of sense for that. But then for Corey's scene, it needed to work in a way where it could serve a much different but equally dramatic sort of purpose, right? Yeah. And so coating it with colors as well for Autumn, having it be purple, but then also adding a little bit of blood on there so that when Corey was wearing it, it would still have this sort of like intimidating presence that we were hoping it would have. Fine balance, but yeah, I feel like when it ended up where it needed to be, it was pretty clear. Whereas a lot of other things, easy to be very subjective and be like, oh, maybe a bit more, a bit less, a bit left, bit right. And that one was like, oh yeah, it's there finally.
Nice. And I'll let Adam come into this, because we'll finish this topic off as well. Obviously, Swann Holloway is the final mask as well. I love Swann.
Yes.
There's two variations of it. People are kind of surprised
Mm.
by this. You have two different color palettes. What were the reasons behind doing two different color tones? Because they are quite very contrasting as well for her mask.
I mean, I'll answer as a player. I love when I'm playing a game and the choices I'm making are having an impact on what is happening, right? And I've seen people speculate about the different choices you need to get the different masks. And I think people have essentially figured out what you need, to make sure you get one or the other. But when the game first released, not just the mask, but so many different facets of the way that the story can play out, and then the little differences that happen, it was so exciting for me to see people see this. And someone is sharing a GIF or a Let's Play, and then someone else watches and they're like, "Oh my God, that thing is different." And it's a little thing. You expect the big story beats to be different. It's like, what ending did you get? And right away, I feel like everyone assumed it's a Don't Nod game. Of course, there are going to be different endings you can have. But then for these little things to change and people to realize, sometimes it takes a few days or a few weeks, and someone's like, "Oh my God, that mask is different than my mask. How is this different? What did you do?" Like that was very exciting for me. Just as a fan to have those things happen. And also, I work, of course, with the narrative team, but in terms of all of the different like levers and pulleys, the subtleties of what sort of like pushes you over the different thresholds to achieve different results. I couldn't
Mhm.
tell you a walkthrough of like, here's exactly what you need to do in each of these scenes. I have like a vague sense of like, okay, if I want the game to unfold this way,
Yeah.
roughly this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to get it. So I'm still occasionally surprised about little things that pop up that, I made the art and I was like, how do I get that specific thing? And then, sometimes I
Yes.
get a different one when I play it and I'm like, oh, cool. I actually had to do this. So yeah, from a player perspective, that is my answer. I think it's just really satisfying, especially with Swann,
Mm.
to have these kinds of things evolve and show up in unexpected ways. And then from an art perspective, again, it was a lot about talking with the narrative team in this regard, making sure that the choices that the player is making up to that
Mhm.
point in the game, if you have behaved one way, you're going to get one result, and if you've behaved a different way, you're going to get a different result. And so it was
Yeah.
talking, with Michel and Nina, and trying to wrap my head around, sort of the different choices on each of those parallel paths, and trying to find a color palette that would align.
Yeah.
And then our character team again did a great job of bringing it all to life in the end.
Very nice. I will move into another topic afterwards, but Adam, please.
So I want to give Sam Bradley, Sam, middle name unknown Bradley. I
It's
want to give
Samuel, by
you.
the way, not
Is
Sam
it
Bradley.
actually Samuel?
Samuel William, but everyone calls me Sam. But yeah, Samuel William Bradley. That's the W in the middle is for William.
Well, then that is a proper British name. Then, so I guess I will appreciate that. I need you. I'm going to give you an opportunity to geek out a little bit.
Oh, please.
So to set up, so when I create, and you talk about emotions in art, and you are in control of the player's emotion essentially, right? Whether it be music or art, you set the tone for what the player sees, what player hears. With music, I think the less the better. Like sometimes, like one scene might call for just a single note on a drop and then build into more notes. Like it's a slow, I think pauses in music really builds tension, right? There's minimalism in sometimes music, whereas a lot of musicians want more sound all the time. My question to you to geek out, right? I need you to explain this picture, and there's some subtleties in it. And what do you see in terms of minimalism? Like when you were designing this, like what kind of emotion did you want for this, and how did you minimize it?
Yeah, so this one is a special one. I guess if there's anyone only audio here, this is a painting that I made that was one of the early inspirations for the concert scene at the end of tape 1. And for folks who've played this, it is like obviously a pretty big emotional beat in the game, right? A lot is revealed here. There's a lot of sort of teasing up to this point in the story, but this is where we have a really solid understanding of what's going on with Kat. And then it's also a culmination of the planning that the girls have been doing essentially all of tape 1 to, put on this concert. They've written their song and, they feel like they've figured out the perfect way to share this with the locals. And yeah, so they decided to set up shop in the parking lot of the Blue Spruce and have their show. And so for me, when I was thinking about this, when I made this painting, there were no visuals at all for that scene yet, so this is pre any cinematic planning, pre any of the stuff that ended up in the trailer for this sequence. It really was just narrative at this point. We knew that there was going to be a concert in the parking lot. I feel like even the character outfits weren't sorted out. Most of them kind of like in progress, so you can see some similarities, but the clothes that they're all wearing ended up changing dramatically because we hadn't figured out their outfits yet. Swann never ended up with this cut off jean jacket, and Nora wears this dress except in a different scene and with a different color. Yeah, and it really what I wanted to do with this one is there are a few different roles that concept art fulfills on a project, and I think that the obvious one and the one from an outside perspective, if you're not a concept artist, probably makes the most sense is you imagine someone making a painting that is going to influence how a film or a movie or a video game or a comic book is going to look in the end, right? And that for sure is part of what is going on here. But another thing that I feel like is a little bit harder to appreciate when you only see the finished product. Our game comes out and then I put a bunch of images on social media. One thing that is sort of lost in there is that a really big role that a painting like this plays is it's an opportunity to have the team align and get excited about a moment in the game, right? So imagine we've got a bunch of people on our team, the team is quite large and some are visual people, but other people are not visual people. So we can say, okay, at the end of tape 1, there's going to be a concert, and it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be emotional, and the player is really going to have a lot of feelings when they're when they're playing the scene. And for some people that's going to make sense, and other people it's going to be harder to visualize. But all of a sudden, if we can pull up a painting and say, okay, actually this is how we're all going to feel, and people see this and they see the emotion on the characters, they see the intensity of the scene, it gets people stoked to like build this moment, right? All of a sudden it's not just like a blueprint about like, okay, these are the colors that we're going to have in the sky. We do use that, like if you look, there's this kind of like stormy green and blue sky that happens in that scene that was inspired by this painting. But for me, the much bigger benefit of an image like this was it really got us all really enthusiastic about building this thing together. And so a bunch of things also changed from this. You can see the staging is different. They're all the girls are up on the truck, Nora's standing on her amp, the flag for the band is hanging off the back of the truck. You don't see the road in the background and the blue spruce off to the side. A lot of those details changed, but to me that's sort of like besides the point, because the heart of the scene is there, right? And so this was a good opportunity, for us to all align on like, okay, this is the vibe. And so even though I wasn't there for the mocap, for example, or the cinematics team, a lot of the work that they were doing I was only seeing sort of tangentially. I know that they had seen this, Michel had shared it with them as part of the launch. There are a bunch of other factors, not just this one painting to set the mood and the tone and direct the sequence. There are going to be a lot of other factors that are going in as well. But this is one of the key materials we had for this sequence to really like get the ball rolling. And so for me, long answer short, the most important part of this was just, let's get aligned on what the scene could be. Let's all get excited about it. Let's be ambitious and see what we can do with it. And this was my way to help kickstart that process.
Nice. Sam, just quickly as well, I'm curious because when you present something like this, because I found it fascinating when I listened to the other podcast when you talk about your history and art and what you were doing. I'm just curious as well because when you go and work for Michel, he is an art director as well, and I'm going to be as frank as well. Were you shitting yourself when you presented some of your art to him? Because like for me, when I saw him for the first time, I was like, oh my god! I was like, Michel's on the call, and it's like. For me, just internally, I felt it, but I'm like, I'm not saying that he's going to say something, but does it make you feel like butterflies in your stomach when you present something like this to your entire crew of people? Because it's reflective of you and then also the other people that work with you, isn't it?
It still does today. This wasn't even just a thing that was like day one at Don't Nod. It was then, but it is now. And I think for me, actually, it's super important that I feel that way. If I'm showing my art to people and I'm not a little bit nervous, not a little bit anxious, it probably means that I'm not being vulnerable. And something that I appreciate more than almost anything else in art is a sense of earnestness and honestness. People like actually putting themselves out there. Kind of goes all the way back to question number one about style. I feel like another thing that I've learned is that like while style is cool, it kind of is a veneer, and you can to a degree hide behind that. For me, what is way, way, way more important is a sense of like honesty and real feeling. And so for me to put art out in front of the team first of all, and then the world after that, it is scary because even though this is work that is client work, this is my job, and there is a specific mandate for all of this stuff. There's I'm sure we'll talk more about this, a lot of collaboration that happens with Michel before I'm making this art. Him and I work very closely on planning what this stuff will be. So it's not like it's just me showing up and saying, hey, we're going to have a concert. There's obviously like a ton of pre-planning that comes before that sort of thing. I still feel like it is kind of incumbent on me, especially as someone in a leadership role, to really put myself into the work. And I hope that it shows. I hope that it connects with people. And now that the game is out there and I see people, I can watch a let's play of the end of tape one and see how people respond. I feel like in a way, me being vulnerable in that sense has paid off, because that scene definitely connects with people. It's one of the things that is great actually about the internet is I can watch people and get like a very candid response to how people are. It's different when I show it to like, one of my friends. Of course, they're going to be like, oh, this is so cool. You made a video game. But I can, go and watch a stranger and see them having a genuine emotional reaction to this thing that I've helped build. It does sort of reinforce the idea to me that if I can be a little bit vulnerable with my art, people are going to be able to, open themselves up to it in a way and have those feelings that I'm hoping they're going to. Yeah. And then just to talk more specifically about showing it to Michel, yeah, of course it was intimidating, especially when I first started to work with him. Because, like I said, I was a fan of his work, and you never know what it's going to be like when you start a new collaboration with
Mm.
anyone. And I think I've had in the past good collaborations and bad collaborations, of course, like anyone in the creative industry. When you're being paid to be creative, you're going to connect better with some people
Yeah.
than you will with others. And yeah, I've worked, with a few other people where coming into the project, like with Michel, I've been a fan of their work coming in to start, and it does add an extra layer of anxiety in there because you don't know if they're going to be cool or not. Like I have
Mm.
thankfully had a number of great experiences with people who I really admire, and they've been very generous, and it has been a really positive experience. But I have also had, the opposite, where some of those collaborations haven't been the most pleasant thing in the world. And so, yeah, I was just unsure. Like I said, it was a very foreign idea, French studio in essentially a different world making this thing. And I'm only consuming the end result, which I love, but I have no idea what the people are like on the
Yeah.
inside, So at the
Mm.
beginning, yeah, it was a little nerve wracking, but obviously, I've been here for many years now and we have like a great creative collaboration. So yeah, thankfully things have worked out so far anyhow.
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
I was going to ask, what's a red flag for you when you're being hired by somebody?
I think it's sometimes hard to recognize people who are very ego driven, but I struggle to work with people like that. And I feel like there is a place for everyone in the creative world, but for me, when I'm collaborating with people, it's really hard to do, I think, for everyone. But one of the most important things about making something great is being willing to acknowledge what the
Yes.
best idea in the room is, and I can think of so many times, not just on Bloom and Rage, but on many projects in my past where good ideas have been presented and recognized, even if they weren't coming from the person in charge. So there are times where
Mm.
I, as the art director, will present ideas to the art team, and someone will come up with an idea that is better than what I had, and it is really my job to embrace that, and
Mm.
it is a red flag to me when I can sense that someone isn't really interested in that kind of collaboration. I don't know. I feel like other people probably can work fine in that sense, but for me, especially in a collaborative environment, I just want to make the best possible end product I can, no matter how we get there. And this is something that Michel and I are very aligned on. He is super receptive to ideas from all directions. He has obviously like very strong opinions and convictions about his intents, but there have been times when people have pitched him things and it is a great idea, and I can see him embrace that and get excited about it. And so when I
Mm.
saw that he was able to work that way, it was a relief for me, because it was dodging one of the red flags you're asking about, which is people who are unwilling to keep their eyes and ears open for great ideas from all directions.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I'm gonna interject here as well because I know Sam, you said that as well about the ego stuff, and I will vouch for that because I heard Sam talk about it in the other podcast. 59-minute timestamp if you're curious about ego and
Yes.
managing that and kind of working on that.
Okay. All
Um,
right.
but Sam, one thing I wanted to ask you was, and it kind of bounced off what Michel said as well, because this was Michel in speaking to Bonus Action in May, and he said it was brought by our art director Sam Bradley. He loved the
Mm.
visuals, the lightings, the colors. It was great, and to give a small homage to this movie, and that was I saw the TV glow. And when
Mm.
I went and watched parts of it, I see a lot of this now, and I can see where a lot of
Right.
the shades coming through. What was it about that made you want to do it from your perspective as well? And then what are some of the things that Lost Records fans should watch out for in terms of similarities they can draw between the two as like a homage?
Oh yeah. Visually, I feel like you're saying, it's kind of all over the place, right? It's very easy even just to watch the trailer for that film and get a sense of how I could have been inspired. I feel like that movie came out, like we were well into production when I saw that movie. It was maybe like 6 months before the game was done, so it was. I don't know that there's anything in our game that I would say is like a, other than the license plate, of course, and there are a bunch of those. I don't know if there's like a specific scene where we decided to light it while looking at something from that game, but it was more so just like, I think whoever was making those choices on that project was drinking from the same well that we were drinking from, and it is nice to see that
Mm.
happening. I don't remember specifically where it was, but I heard someone was asking him about the similarities to Yellow Jackets at one point in an interview, and he was saying a similar thing where he wasn't watching that show, hadn't seen it at the time, but then after seeing it, it is sometimes maybe a little nerve-wracking in the same way that when I watched that movie, I saw the TV Glow, the colors, I'm like, oh my gosh, is it going to look like we're ripping these people off? But it really isn't. It's just like, it's reassuring in a way because, we're taking our inspirations from similar but obviously different places, and other people whose work that I admire are featuring some of the things that we're excited to share in our project. So it gives me confidence that the people who respond well to that will respond well to what we're doing, So it's just like a good motivator and a good sign that, okay, we're headed in a direction that I think people are going to connect with. It works for us. It's nice to know that it's going to work for other people at some point, fingers crossed. Yeah. And then the other part about that movie is just even aside from the visuals, like there's a fictional TV show in that movie that is essentially Buffy the Vampire Slayer that plays a very large role in the narrative in that. And while we don't have like our equivalent of that in Lost Records, that was a huge reference point for us. I love that show. Nina or Desiree, sorry, our writer, is a huge fan of that. Michelle is a huge fan of Buffy. Luke is watching Buffy right now. It's like the team where, it's just like, and you can see it in their previous works as well. From before I was at Don't Nod, they were obviously inspired by Buffy. It is like a cultural touchstone. That show's been referenced in so many different ways. But that was another thing about I saw the TV Glow, is that they had this very, very direct homage to Buffy in there, and that was cool because we were all fans of it. And I was like, yes, here's another bit of overlap between this cool project and what we're doing.
Absolutely.
Oh, very cool. Did you pick up on the ethereal dance then when you saw it for the first time in the scene? Because obviously Michelle said that's a direct influence from Buffy, and when you watch the scene in Buffy, it shows. Did you pick up on that?
I think he actually told me that it was going to be inspired by that before I saw the visuals, right? Because we had talked a lot about that scene because working on the masks and the way that it was going to play out. And also that scene, I knew that there was going to be a pretty strong lighting component. So I would be working with the lighting team to get that magic going. And then also the fire afterwards that comes, the following scene. So there was a lot of, even before we had done any of the cinematics or there were any visuals, him and I had talked through a lot of the choreography about the whole sequence so that I could start to visualize, what the VFX would need to be for that sequence. And with our VFX artist who did a really phenomenal job for the dance scene specifically, and our lighting team, the music and the light is pulsing in sync, and the way that the camera cuts are happening at the same time. The whole sequence turned out really great. So I had a sense that was going to come. It was spoiled for me that I knew that there was going to be this very clear Buffy homage in there, but I would have caught it anyhow because like I said, I'm a huge Buffy fan.
And that's a wrap for Side A. I hope you enjoyed that. It was an absolute pleasure digging into the first part of that podcast, and we absolutely loved all the time that we had with Sam. And as you'll see as well, we have even more time with Sam because the next episode is pretty much the same length as well, and we get even deeper into Lost Records. But it's fascinating to hear his story so far, and I hope you look forward to that next part. So before we sign off as well, a big shout out to our Patreon subscribers, and I can do this because I deleted the recording with Adam. Big shout out to our Patreon subscribers, so Kevin Lackner, Sunday, Claire McLaughlin, Jake, Carly, Godberry, Kevin Kestis, Clark, Mr. Anslemy, Spunger, The Lost Fan, Paul Grosh, Xavier, and Ashlyn Nala as well. So thank you so much for all the support on Patreon. It really is really helpful, and stay tuned as well. We will have a Patreon incentive coming up for the custom podcast episode later this month. So that'll be coming very soon. But thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed that interview. It was a pleasure speaking to Sam. He's got even more incredible insights to share on Lost Records in the second part. And before we sign off as well, if you are new here, please do consider dropping subscribe on the channel, turn notification, like the video, and share with your friends. You can help support us. We're getting close to 2,200 subscribers, and the Lost Records Journal is available on all podcast services. So go and check us out on Spotify with the video version, Apple Podcasts. Any ratings you can do for that can help boost our visibility, and you can also instantly follow us as well, so you can get access to the podcast episodes as soon as they become available, like this one. But please bear with us. It's just been a really busy period with things, and I'm just grateful that we finally got this one out. But I hope you really enjoyed it. It was an absolute pleasure speaking with him. So many amazing things to learn there, and there's so many more as well, things that he's got to share with you in the next part. So stay tuned. Strangecast is coming very soon. Until next time, guys. Until next time. See you later, guys. Bye. No, very cool, very cool. And I'm going to keep the process on Michel as well, because obviously one of the things that we all get to enjoy is the key art with the feet dangling from the ledge.
Oh yeah.
We all love that, and then
Yes.
obviously it becomes the main menu screen as well, and it kind of evolved into that. Talk us through that process of making something like that, because it seems so simple, yet it feels so, I don't know, like butterflies. At least when I look at it every time, I feel like it's quite powerful. Just
Mm.
the representation of a summer in in the 1990s, 1995. Walk us through that process of making something like that.
Yeah, so this one is really cool.